Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Los Angeles. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Paul Rietzel. We are ready for round number 6 where we've got Andrew Bäckström. That's the guy on the right-hand side of your screen there. He's playing, what is this, green-blue stompy to a 5-0 record. On the other side, Greg Keithley's on mono-red aggro, and we mean it this time. No black, no Dragon Skull Summit, nothing, just red cards.
Minimal messing around, just trying to get this thing over with as quickly as possible. Andrew, it seems like probably just decided beforehand he wanted to bust out the Hinterland Harbors, and so he found a way to do that.
In the meantime, his Llanowar Elves is going to hit the bin thanks to a shock, and that's going to clear the way for this Bomat Courier to continue attacking. That's 2 cards under it right now. You will note, by the way, that Andrew Bäckström is currently number 25 on the top 25 pro rankings. He has cracked that elusive top 25, a great run for Andrew this season, and good for him.
So the double Rampager. Explain the flavor of that to me.
It's hungry.
But it's hiding. It goes out and
it gets too full to
eats
show up.
Right,
to
eats a
fight.
little bit.
It's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Greenbelt Rampager, good sizing for the matchup. The fact that it's so cheap and has that 4th toughness, so it can block the Goblin Chain Whirler. Of course, there are plenty of cards like Cut, Glorybringer, and of course Chandra, Torch of Defiance that can kill 4 toughness creatures. Interesting. Very aggressive.
Yeah, so that was an Abrade on the Steel Leaf Champion, but of course it doesn't actually kill it, but thanks to the Silscar Mage, it will put 3 -1/-1 counters on it, though it's still there. It's reduced to just a 1/2 here, but, a 2/1, but.
And what Greg would love to do is be able to just slam down a Chain Whirler here, but instead has to use a lot of resources there.
Wow, just the clean 2-for-1 in Bäckström's favor there. And remember, he's going to play that Rampager next turn minimal.
Yep. Although Greg is okay with potentially getting 2-for-1, it's pretty unlikely that a green-blue deck has a meaningful way to interact with Bomat Courier. What he doesn't know is Andrew came packing Walking Ballistas here for the tournament.
Ooh.
So, Greg probably thinks that Bomat Courier is going to safely keep ticking up and then refill his hand as leisure. But Andrew could catch him napping.
Yeah, it would be a really, really great turn if Bäckström could go Walking Ballista, kill your Courier, and just play the Greenbelt Rampager, go. Oof.
We hear that, big missed land drop for Greg. All you want to do when you have a good red draw with Bomat Courier is continue to play lands so that when you crack off the Bomat Courier, it refills your hand. Greg with a missed 3rd land drop is giving Andrew a big window in this game.
And it looks like Andrew's going to continue to be mana efficient here, prioritizing tapping out each turn. And he's going to play a Vinemare.
Yeah, difficult spot for Greg for sure. I mean, as old as the day in Magic is the player with 4 lands versus the player with 2 lands can usually do some much more powerful things.
I wonder how many cards Greg has in his hand. Is it just 2? It's 3. Interesting.
Oh, and they are good cards.
They certainly are. Not really the kind you'd traditionally like to pitch to a Courier, but perhaps Greg just thinking, you know what, I just don't have the time for this. Wow, yeah, he's going to cash in the Courier.
2 Hazarets and a Phoenix. Boom, right to the yard.
Let's see if he gets something better. He's very likely to hit his land drop at the minimal, but he does need to find some action on top of it. Okay, another Silscar Mage. Cute. Go.
Andrew really in the driver's seat here. Greg had a good start to the game with some couple 1-drops and a few removal spells, but missing that land drop really hindered the ability of Bomat Courier to press his advantage, and the 2 Hazarets and the Rekindling Phoenix that he had in his opening hand are now in the graveyard. So, Greg got Andrew down to 13, but now the shields are kind of up, and Andrew can start to turn the corner here.
He's got Commit to Memory in his hand. We, of course, know about the Greenbelt Rampager that's still there. And look at this. Vinemare's getting in the red zone. Andrew Bäckström not horsing around this time.
One of the things you see strong players do is when they start to take a little bit of an advantage in a game, they put their foot to the pedal quickly. They know that Greg, once he gets to the 4 or 5 mana portion of the game, can still play really powerful threats. And so Andrew wants to get Greg dead before Greg has the chance to fully utilize the new grip of cards that Bomat Courier gave him.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to take the reins once it's given to you.
Is that a Vinemare joke?
No. What do you mean? Oh, it's a horse. I get it now. Greg with that critical 4th land, though, is really in a spot where he could do some damage here.
Yeah,
Andrew's just going to lean on that commit.
Very much so, yeah. I think Andrew, the blue in this deck is incidental, right? He feels like Botanical Sanctum and Hinterland Harbor is basically free, so he's really counting on Negate and Spell Pierce post board. But here in the pre-sideboard games, commit is really his only blue splash. Here it just looks so strong, though.
Well, he went for a Braid on the Greenbelt Rampager, shrinking it down to a measly 0-1. And relegating it to a chump block to soak up 2 damage here, which is exactly what it's going to do. But Andrew's only dropping down to 11, so he's still in reasonable shape with that Vinemare.
You have to really like the way that Greg just navigated that turn. It's almost like he sniffed out the commit, didn't commit, excuse me, no pun intended, anything larger to the board, and really just used, the kind of efficient Abrade. And yeah, I think Andrew is kind of priced into using this commit. You can't just leave up 4 mana the entire game. So
yeah,
nice sequence by Greg.
Feels a little awkward to put a 1-drop back up, but do what you got to do. And meanwhile, Andrew is still pretty cleanly ahead on board with a 5-3 versus just the 1-2. So crunching again. And there's another Greenbelt Rampager, though this one is going to remain hungry. But now it'll come back down and stick. Does he have something else? How about Ronus the Indomitable? All right. Well, we're doing it. Green-blue Stompy living up to its name. Really just running roughshod over Greg at this point. That is a lot of power and toughness on the other side of the field here.
Yeah, and we pointed out before the mono red versions of these Goblin Chain Whirler decks tend to do pretty well against other red decks. You don't mess around with the black mana. You just kind of have a consistent draw. They're not as strong against the green decks because they don't usually play things like Cut. They don't play main deck Chandra. They don't play Glorybringer. And those are the kinds of cards you need to beat green. Creature combat is not how you beat green decks. You beat green decks by removing their creatures from the battlefield.
Well, let's see how Andrew wants to proceed. He's got Greg Keithley firmly up against the ropes. What is this? Hello, Verdurous Gearhulk as well. Wow, Andrew Beckstrom's draw has really kind of sung here. I mean, he has been using up most or all of his mana every turn, and to great effect. He's going to start out by putting 3 counters on the Vinemare, putting it at 6 toughness.
I think Andrew wants to try to force Greg into as many uncomfortable blocks this turn as possible to minimize the chances of something going horribly wrong on Greg's next turn. Andrew's thinking, okay, if I get lightning striked here down to 8, what are the ways in which I die on Greg's next turn? And so Andrew, producing as much power right now and forcing Greg to put at least one of his creatures into combat.
Yeah, he's attacking for 17 here. It's a huge attack. And Greg Keithley just doesn't even bother blocking. He says he's seen enough.
Didn't have the lightning strike, didn't have an additional on-crop crasher, didn't have those tools that he needed to maybe sneak through the damage.
Huh. Really key moment in that game, of course, was that Bomat Courier.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he gave up a lot of his late game big stuff to just try to hit that land drop and keep things rolling. It was hard to blame him you know, if he missed another land drop, you got to figure he's losing the game, just not casting a spell for too many turns.
Yeah, occasionally red decks can miss their 4th land drop for a turn and be okay, but you really have to hit that 3rd land drop. The 3rd land drop is where you either put the Chain Whirlers or the On-Crop Crushers or potentially double spell online, and also makes your Bomat Courier much more effective. So Greg missing his 3rd land drop put him too far behind, and Andrew steals game 1. And after sideboard, actually looks better for Andrew. Andrew's able to bring in 3 copies of Aethersphere Harvester, which is a really, really powerful card against these red decks.
This is pretty common as well, right? The decks that are, you know, 2 colors have a lot more options out of their sideboard compared to the mono red. It's part of, or not just mono red, but the mono color decks. It's a big part of what you give up by getting that consistency is the flexibility in later parts of the game or the match.
Red is so strong in Standard, though, that Greg still has access to plenty of good cards against green. 3 copies of Chandra Torch of Defiance, 2 Glory Bringers, and 2 Fight with Fire. Kind of an interesting card. Fight with Fire, when combined with a Soulscar Mage, can take down something like Aronis. Obviously 5 damage, enough to kill a Steel Leaf Champion or Greenbelt Rampager. So a nice card for Greg. And obviously, as we've seen in Dominaria Limited, can help mitigate some of those draws that Greg has where he draws many, many lands. Might we see a kicked Fight with Fire at some point in games 2 or 3?
Oh, I'd like that. You just don't see that very often.
You do not. Andrew has some truly terrible cards in his deck. I mean, he's got 2 copies of Resilient Kenra. He's got Adventurous Impulse, a card that's consistently underperformed for me. But, I mean, between him and Matt Nass, you know, that kind of dynamic duo, they've been breaking formats left and right. So, you know, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility that I'm wrong and they're right when it comes to Standard. And maybe this is an angle that deserves further exploration.
You know how it is. There's a fine line between 2 great players like that working together and breaking it, and 2 great players working together and enabling each other to play a bad deck.
Sure. You can just see, you know, 19 Red Bulls and a bunch of Cheez-Its later after a weekend of just nonsense when, you know, they're just crumbs everywhere and they just haven't left their apartment. They're like, yeah, we've done it. It's exactly 2 Resilient Kenra. This is perfect, you know. So
this deck seems sweet, though, I have to say.
Oh, it's great.
If you like power and toughness, you came to the right place because Andrew Beckstrom has brought the big boys on his side of the battlefield. Greg Keithley going for the more streamlined mono red version of the aggro deck that's so popular right now.
Absolutely. And one important thing with the green splashing the blue is stronger against the Teferi decks than green splashing the black. Negate, much more powerful than Duress when your opponent's trying to resolve things like Nexus of Fate. Duress still has the same kind of drawback as it's always had, which is that if you draw it in the wrong order, you know, you draw it too late or too early, you know, it's not effective. Whereas Negate, you can just hold for the exact right spell.
5-0 are both of our players here with different takes on the format. A little bit for Greg and a big departure for Beckstrom. This is not a deck that you routinely see.
Yeah. The one card I really like in Andrew's deck and a card that I think is probably one of the most underrated cards in potentially the history of Standard is Verdurous Gearhulk. It's you know, it's going to be rotating out shortly in a few months, and it's certainly been in its fair share of good decks. But my God, how many times have we seen where, you know, if people find their 5th land drop and play Verdurous Gearhulk, it turns the battlefield into an absolute nightmare for their opponent. You know, certainly it's been in plenty of decks combined with Winding Constrictor, but it does plenty on its own. So, look, it's not Glorybringer, but certainly a really, really powerful 5-mana play.
Yeah, just another one of those cards. If you want power and toughness, here's 8. Spread it around.
They did not used to make creatures like that in my day.
No, I mean, that is an absurdly powerful card just based on raw stats. All right, Soulscar Mage to kick things off. Botanical Sanctum into the much maligned Llanowar Elves. He may only get a window of 1 turn to use that elf. Public enemy number 1 in Standard, of course, is Ley Chain Whirler, and that thing eats up elves. So it looks like in this case, Keithley perhaps didn't have one and just wanted to take Beckstrom off of the elf, the old Bolt the Bird, as they say. And gets in for 2 as well.
And Greg's deck, or excuse me, Greg's hand, not particularly well equipped to handle turn 2 Steel Leaf Champion, so forced to use a pretty powerful removal spell in Abrade on Llanowar Elves, which is an exchange that Andrew is going to take all day long. If he can get a 2-mana removal spell out of his hand for Llanowar Elves, he's thrilled.
Yeah, the exchanges that you see in Standard in the current era are heavily tempo based, meaning that you do want to try to spend less mana for your answers than your opponent spent for the thing that you're answering. And when you don't get to do that, it is one way that you can fall behind play pattern wise. The other thing that you'll note is how swingy it is. If one player misses a significant beat and the other doesn't, the game is it's like a teeter-totter.
Yes.
Right? It goes back and forth based on whose turn it is, and if one player just doesn't teeter, the other one just goes and it just snowballs really quickly.
Right. Yeah, and Andrew has to love the way these early turns have developed. You know, his Llanowar Elves got a 2-mana removal spell. He's getting to untap on his turn 3 with access to 4 mana. Kind of everything Andrew wants is happening well. Wow, is that an attack?
Yeah, look at that.
Great play by Andrew there. Knowing that if Greg had a cheap removal spell or some sort of cheap spell he could cast to trigger prowess, you know, he very likely would have used it to not let Andrew untap with Servant. So nice, smart attack.
Jeez, I like that from Beckstrom. He also has 2 follow-up plays, which is another way you can get ahead. I mentioned that kind of tempo feel in Standard. Playing 2 spells in 1 turn is a way to really assert dominance on the battlefield. And Andrew's done that, although it was a 2-drop and a 1-drop. Another Servant of the Conduit and the Greenbelt Rampager has been added to the field. But as you can see, he has pulled cleanly ahead of Greg at this point.
The flaw in these mono red decks is that they often cut lands, you know, and that helps them get more threat dense in game 1. But it means that some of the really cool 4 and 5 and 6 mana cards, the Rekindling Phoenix, the Chandra Torch of Defiance, the Glorybringers of the world, are more difficult to cast when you're only playing 24 as opposed to 25 or 26 lands. It's not trivially easy to just ramp straight up to 4 or 5 mana. We've seen 2 consecutive games now where Greg does not have enough basic mountains in order to execute his game plan.
Land for Beckstrom. Let's see what he has for us now. Well, there's Ronus. And it looks like he feels like he's got an attack here. Yeah, he's going to get in there.
Wow.
Jeez. Well, he's played 2 spells a turn for the past 2 turns now.
And Servant of the Conduit, interestingly, you know, obviously gets worse as the game goes along. The size of the body less relevant, but a card that we've seen be pretty good in Standard for a fairly long time. Ronus the Indomitable means that these kind of incidental servants, these 2/2 bodies that are being left behind, even after Andrew no longer needs necessarily the mana to cast spells, not only can the mana be can be filtered in through Ronus the Indomitable, but they're creatures that are available to be pumped by the Ronus the Indomitable. So Andrew kind of creating this mess of a battlefield that's going to create very uncomfortable combats for Greg that his red creatures are not well equipped to get into.
Ooh, and there's a Vine Mare, which means that Andrew doesn't even have to worry about pumping up one of his other creatures just to get Ronus into attack mode. He just has that now.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty close to ready to call this one.
Yeah.
You know, that Greg missing too many land drops here, and he would need, we've joked, something like Sweltering Suns to get himself back into this game, which is not a card that he has access to.
And look at this attack. In.
Yeah, Sweltering Suns, we've seen some people playing that card in Standard. It certainly has made a little bit of a resurgence, but not a card that you're going to see out of a mono-red aggro deck. Greg, you see kind of like shrug, like, okay, what am I going to do?
Yeah, I mean, he better have a spell this turn as well with that 3 mana to do something.
Yeah. Ever since Dr. Garfield invented this wonderful game, green creatures have been very large and red creatures not so large.
That's right. It's like Shock is the only thing he has, perhaps. Beckstrom anticipating a Shock. Puts a counter, in fact, on Ronus.
Makes sense.
Yeah, he's taking 2 less damage no matter what, but Ronus is a pretty gnarly threat.
And puts Ronus in range of a
braid.
A bolt type effect, yeah.
He finds that fourth land, but is it too late? We mentioned the teeter-totter going back and forth, and I feel like Andrew did the thing where, like, you get all the way to the bottom, and then you just jump off the teeter-totter,
Yep.
and your opponent goes crashing down to the ground. Greg down to 7 life and facing a massive board state at this point. He realistically can only play, I think, 1 spell this turn, and it doesn't even matter if it happens to be a Chandra or a Phoenix. Those are some of his better plays, but
It has to be, it has to go Chandra minus kill your Ronus, and then he's going to have to chump block Divine Mare and then untap, and have a huge Chandra fueled turn the next turn to have any chance. But it's not not exciting. It's interested to see what Andrew does this turn. If he doesn't have anything, if he has anything, then Greg's certainly just dead. Will everything just come at Greg? Okay. Wow. This is, you see the way Andrew's lining this up. Andrew's lining it up to force Greg into a chump block and still kill Greg Chandra. So really nice play here from Andrew Beckstrom.
Super smart from BK. That's his nickname.
All the nightmare situations from Andrew, all the ways in which this game goes wrong, which are very unlikely, involve Greg untapping with Chandra and being able to make 6 or 7 mana on his next turn. Anything short of that, and Greg is certainly going to be dead.
All right. You mentioned it at the beginning. He's brought that alteration in. Was this in the board? The metamorphic alteration? Or was it
this
main
is a
deck?
sideboard card, and he just pump faked him.
Yeah. So what it does is it turns a creature that it enchants into a copy of any creature he wants it to be.
Wild
and he
horses.
he chose something much bigger than the 2/2 that it was going to be. And look at that look on Andrew's face. He's like, hey, I think I've got the win here one way or the other. It took him a few minutes to find it there at the end, but he had it.
Yeah, he's like, well, I've got an amazing looking attack here. I can get you down to a few life, and I can finish off your Chandra. I'm in great shape. Or I could just end the game right now. And once he found that play, he's, of course, went for it.
He decided that ending the game right now looks a little bit more appealing. We're going to have a quick chat with Andrew in just a minute. We're getting him mic'd up down in the feature match area. So we get a chance to ask him about this deck.
Yes.
And about metamorphic alteration and about choosing that third category of decks. We'll get all the answers from him. But in the meantime, boy, stomping is exactly what he's doing. He's running over everybody with this deck. He hasn't lost yet today.
Amazing, yeah. And the games where your land or elves don't get eaten by Goblin Chain Whirler and when your opponent misses a few land drops, these green decks are very unforgiving. Cards like Steel Leaf Champion and Vine Mare and Ronus and Verter's Gearhulk. As we mentioned, it's a ton of power. It's often trample, hexproof, activated abilities, all sorts of mess. And the last thing you want to do is try to get into a blocking, let me get into combat. These are green creatures that you do not want to mess with. You need to kill it and keep their board clean or you are going to get ran over.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened here in short order as well. Do you feel like the mono-red deck that he faced from Greg would he be happier to face that one each round or happier to face the one with black?
Much prefer to play against the mono-red version, the lower to the ground version, because they don't have access to as many ways to deal 4 damage, 4 being a key amount to kill the Steel Leaf Champion game 1. Again, we talked about Cut, Chandra, and Glorybringer are cards that the mono-red deck very infrequently uses main deck. And then also, because you're not playing black, there's not things like Unlicensed Disintegration, another one of the absolute strongest card versus green. And by being low to the ground, you're playing more of an early game creature combat, try to swarm you type of deal. Exactly the type of game plan that green is well equipped to deal with. It's less well equipped to deal with, let me play a bunch of lands, kill your things, play flyers, planeswalkers, expensive spells. That's the kind of game plan that tends to do pretty well against green decks.
What about against control decks? We got a chance to look at it, and it was, well, you know what? Let's just ask him directly because we've got Andrew Beckstrom down in the feature match area, all mic'd up for an interview. BK, Marshall and Paul Rietzel in the booth. Nice win there, buddy. Undefeated on the day. Looking pretty good.
Thanks, guys. Good to talk with you.
Okay, we got to know about this deck because we talked earlier in the day, Paul and I, before we even covered a single match, and Paul broke down Standard into 3 broad categories. Chain Whirler, Teferi, and decks you shouldn't play.
Pretty reasonable.
How did you end up playing this green with blue deck?
I'm really a player who I think I play my best when I'm enjoying the cards and decks I'm playing, and for whatever reason, those decks haven't spoken to me, and so sometimes you got to get a little creative and a little outside the box to bring the best out of yourself, and I'm trying to do that my best this weekend.
So how did you put the deck together? Was it just you? Was it you and Matt or Sam, or who built it?
This was mostly just a solo endeavor. I did talk to those guys a bunch. We got a lot of talented Magic players out in Denver that I can consult with. But no, this was just something I've been working on for a little bit. I like some of the things that the green deck is doing. One of the things that I have not enjoyed is its lack of game against the card Rekindling Phoenix, and so a lot of the choices I've made in my main deck and sideboard have gone towards improving my matchup against that one card in particular.
Yeah, I particularly, Paul Rietzel here, Andrew, I particularly like the blue as opposed to some of the black that we've seen in some of these green splash decks. I was mentioning how strong Commit seems, and Negate and Spell Pierce seem like such strong sideboard cards against Turbo Fog specifically, whereas Duress oftentimes is not exactly the right timing. When you negate a Nexus of Fate, the game's almost over. So was the blue with Turbo Fog in mind?
Oh, totally. Yeah, you want to have better game against the non-creature decks. Teferi is such a powerful card that you need to have cheap, efficient answers. And that's one of the things I like about the way that I've built this list with things like Greenbelt Rampager is you get to play that sort of weird fish-style game where you have this really cheap, efficient clock that you can get down and then hold up a counterspell like a Commit for a Torrential Gearhulk or a Negate for a Teferi for that critical turn when they try to come back against all that chip damage you've been doing.
Yeah, and I mentioned also to Marshall, I think that Verdurous Gearhulk is perhaps the most underrated card in the last 2 years in Standard. Is that a card that you've played a lot over the last couple of years in Standard?
Oh yeah, I've always found that a lot of decks could be improved. I did quite well at the back when Felidar Guardian Saheeli Riley was around by having a copy or two of that card defined with Oath of Nissa, and then you could flicker it and do all sorts of things. A lot of what's going on with this deck is the Adventurous Impulses allow you to set up these sort of mini creature combos, things like Walking Ballista plus Verdurous Gearhulk or Vine Mare plus Ronus, and Vine Mare is also great with Verdurous Gearhulk, and so you're able to assemble something a lot more powerful than just being so reliant on, oh wow, against a field of unlicensed disintegrations and counterspells, I really hope this Galta sticks, and that's just not that reliable.
Yeah.
Metamorphic Alteration?
Yeah.
What in the world is that doing?
Yeah, so you all got to witness the first time I've ever put that card on the stack. I did a deep
for the win, by the way.
Yeah, so I actually almost froze up and attacked my opponent for a non-lethal amount because it's really in the deck for two reasons. The first is to be able to turn Rekindling Phoenix into literally any creature in the format that isn't Rekindling Phoenix. So if my opponent had slammed Rekindling Phoenix at some point in that game, I was thrilled to be able to turn it into a Soulscar Mage, for instance. It removes the ability. Some things like Ether Meltdown are oftentimes good against creatures that are sort of recursive, but with the Phoenix, they could just easily just Lightning Strike it or block and get it back. So those sorts of cards don't work. I did a deep dive on Gatherer yesterday and was like, what can I do to give myself a permanent answer to the Phoenix? It also, I think, will give me good game in the mirror where Galta is so important. So either being able to turn opposing Galtas into something like a Llanowar Elves or turn my Llanowar Elves into a Galta if it's on the enemy side of the board.
Last question from me, Andrew. Do you have any superstition or any routine on the turn where you pass turn 3 with Llanowar Elves in play and you're praying for no Chain Whirler? What do you normally do to prevent the Chain Whirler from coming down?
Is it a coin flip? Do
Yeah.
you rub
How
your
do you-
temples?
yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had some sort of secret. It's really just about rolling the dice. I mean, Llanowar Elves is such a powerful card. I mean, it's like I talked with a friend of mine, Caroline Kavanaugh, this morning, who's also playing the deck, and she was asking me about sideboard plans, and she asked me, like, do you like taking out Llanowar Elves against Chain Whirler decks? And I told her I just prefer to get lucky.
Well, Andrew, good luck, man. You've got a cool deck, and you're off to a great start. Also, number 25 in the world right now in the top 25 pro rankings. Congratulations on that, and good luck the rest of the way.
Hopefully higher soon.
I love it. Yeah, I love it, by the way, what he said about bringing in the decks, because there are certain truths about Magic and about gaming that are hard to swallow. Like, if you were to design the perfect pro Magic player, she wouldn't care about if you liked playing the cards
Right.
or if the artwork or if there was something that you enjoyed. It's like, who cares? Play the deck that's the best. But you know what? Most of us are still human beings. We're not, the Terminator of professional Magic players. And Andrew just recognizes I just play better when I'm playing a deck that I enjoy playing. And I'm going to do that
Yep.
rather than sleeving up a deck that he's miserable with and feels like he'll actually play worse with.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't want to bunt for a base hit. You want to swing for the fences. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's just like sometimes, look, maybe he's giving up a percent or two here. He certainly has brought a deck that he has prepared with, that he feels is competitive, and he feels gives him a chance in the field, and he's having fun doing it. So why not?
Yeah, let's not get too hard on him there. So we're going to be back, and just a few minutes, we're going to have Time Walk Magic for you here from Los Angeles. Don't go anywhere. Los Angeles. That's Paul Reitzel, Marshall Sutcliffe. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got Time Walk Magic lined up. We've got Keaton Wood And he is playing against Steve Rubin. So let's head on down to that right now. Hello there. Welcome back to coverage here at GP Los Angeles. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Paul Rietzel. We've got Time Walk lined up for you. Now, I'm going to tell you, Paul, you've probably already noticed, those names, they ain't right.
Yeah, Steve Rubin has not morphed into Sam Black.
No.
In fact, he morphed back into himself.
Look at that. He morphed right away. Now,
Steve Rubin's actually on the Grixis as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what you're going to notice then is that the names are not currently correct. Or excuse me, the deck names is what I meant to say. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're almost there. The records are right. We are in round 6. We are playing standard, and that is Steve Rubin, who just played in Ether Hub. So.
That's right. So just disregard the other part, and the rest of it we get to watch. Now, what are the actual decks here, though?
So Keaton Wood has listed his deck on deck list as Chain Whirler Control with 2 copies of On-Crop Crasher, which would be a unique take on Chain Whirler Control.
Heart of Kieran.
Heart of Kieran and that sort of thing. He's playing the Chain Whirler mid-range or Chain Whirler aggro deck. Steve Rubin is on kind of a pure Grixis mid-range deck. So lots of creatures, right? Torrential Gear Hulk, the Scarab God, Nicol Bolas, Glint Sleeve Siphoner, Champion of Wits. Steve Rubin even has a copy of Rekindling Phoenix, which is not something that we've seen very often in these Grixis decks. Kind of just a pure mid-range good stuff kind of deck.
Supreme Will. It's going to counter Bomat Courier number 2, but Keaton's going to go ahead and jam with the other one, leaving up that red mana as well. Though it's probably not time to crack it thus quite yet. What does he have here? Karizev? No, Heart of Kieran. Passes the turn back to Rubin.
I've been trying to make these Grixis decks work for some time right now, and I can't quite, find the perfect mixture, and that's why
you feel like it's out there, though?
I don't know. I mean, maybe Steve Rubin has it. He's 5-0. Maybe that Rekindling Phoenix has been doing it for him. He's got a very specific kind of mix of removal spells, so it's certainly possible. I wasn't able to make it happen, but maybe Steve has.
Still Scar Mage for Wood. But wait, there's more Karizev.
This is quite a crew.
And I think they're all going to get in, aren't they? Yeah, they're all getting in the boat. Getting in the big ship here, Heart of Kieran. Send it in. Uh-oh. Abrade number 2? No, Cycle of Land.
Trying to find the one-of copy of Fatal Push, main deck.
Didn't find it. So instead he's going to drop down to 13. And he's got his hands full here. That is a built-out board on the other side for Keaton Wood. Ooh, but how about the Scarab God? That's the kind of card that you don't want to let your opponent untap with if you can help it. Keaton Wood, though, not really in a position to kill Steve just yet, so he's going to have to find an answer for it or face the thing down.
Bomat Courier, pretty attractive here, the ability to go deep. Okay, this works as well. So he's going to be able to hit him for 5 here, it looks like.
Poor Ragavan.
This poor monkey.
Yeah, it just gets thrown into the maw.
He goes to grab he goes to grab the token. The Scarab God eats it.
Steve says, I'll save you the time. I'm going to block the monkey.
All right, so Steve gets to untap with the Scarab God, but facing 8 power worth of flying is not where he wants to be.
No, only creature is a Bomat Courier in any graveyard.
We've mentioned before that kind of the key card in the situation is Vraska's Contempt. That's the card that can get you back into a lot of these games.
But Steve playing a land and passing the turn back. Does he run Torrential Gear Hulk?
He does have Torrential Gear Hulk. He also has 4 copies of Vraska's Contempt that he could possibly use here.
Okay, all right. Gear Hulk for an Abrade.
Okay, so that's basically, yeah, the sequence where he gets back into this is Gear Hulk, Abrade your Heart of Kieran, untap, find, a cheap removal spell for Rekindling Phoenix so we could immediately reanimate it with the Scarab God, or, obviously something like Vraska's Contempt that deals with the Rekindling Phoenix on a permanent basis. So
Keaton's taking a long look.
The nightmare for Keaton is basically that Steve has something like an Abrade or a Harness Lightning in his hand. Oh my gosh.
That would be terrible.
Because then Steve could just kill the Rekindling Phoenix, reanimate it, and use it to block the Heart of Kirin. But Hazoret's pretty attractive here, as Hazoret can attack into Scarab God with no fear. Hazoret doesn't really fear anything.
No. Indestructible will do that for you.
Hazoret really only has one fear, and that's people like me entering combat with 2 cards in their hand.
All right, there it is, the Torrential Gearhulk, but Steve is facing quite an attack force, a Rekindling Phoenix, a Heart of Kirin in the air, and Hazoret the Fervent on the ground. Hazoret shouldn't be a problem thanks to the Gearhulk, but that is still lethal coming through in the air that Steve has to consider.
So he's considering potentially killing the Phoenix and then reanimating it on his next turn. It's an option here.
So he's still going to fall down to 4. This is a big sequence for this initial game. Steve Rubin can untap, get the Rekindling Phoenix.
He's still got a mess.
Yes, this is still a very problem.
That Abrade should be in exile, right? The one in his graveyard?
Yes, it should.
We probably want to solve that before he accidentally draws another Torrential Gearhulk.
Fortunately, we're in time walk mode here, so we're just
shoot.
passengers for this one. I really hope that doesn't come up.
Yes, me too.
Oh, yeah, Keaton Wood all over it.
Did they hear us from the past?
Our voices echoed through
Is that another?
time.
Did he just draw a Torrential Gearhulk or Abrade?
It'd be a massive draw step if he did.
Yeah, still needs to find an answer to that Hazoret because Hazoret's activated ability when combined with the cards from Bomac Courier, it puts a lot of pressure on 4 life. But, man.
But this actually gives him a scenario where he can use the Abrade to survive this turn and then find a Vraska's Contempt.
Yeah, he does need Vraska's Contempt, but or Hour of Devastation. That would be his other way out of this mess. Interesting spot. So if he were to crew, yeah. There, block there, block there. Is it lethal or is that 4? So right now he is presenting lethal if Steve didn't have anything, right? The activation from the Hazoret. 1, 2, 3 blockers. He would be able to get in for at least 2 damage. But such a play would involve all of his creatures dying if Steve had a cheap removal spell. Okay. Interesting. That's an interesting move. Now he no longer has the ability to activate Hazoret this turn. Yeah.
He figures that that's better.
So the way it looks is that he's going to be threatening 3 damage coming in.
Then hoping to untap and chuck a card at him with Hazoret and win the game. Well, that seems fine, but he also just had the option to say, chuck a card at you, untap, chuck a card at you. It's just the same thing, except for he doesn't have to risk his creatures.
So I guess the question here, does that elemental from the Rekindling Phoenix get sacrificed on Keaton's upkeep, even if there's no Rekindling Phoenix in his graveyard?
Yeah, the chat was just going over that as well.
I believe the answer is yes. I don't know for sure.
There are differing opinions currently, so I don't know the answer either.
Someone knows. I'll tell you that for sure.
At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this creature and return target card named Rekindling Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Sounds like you would not sacrifice it then, because there's
No
no
target.
target. Yeah, so you can't find a target. But I don't know. They have been made a lot of cards like this. So
Yeah. Well, I think we nailed it, Paul. I'm keeping it. So it doesn't have any power anyway, so it won't affect combat in that way. But of course, you want to get it cleared up.
So if I understand correctly, we're in Keaton's combat step before attackers are declared, and Steve looks like he's moving some creatures around. He may or may not be considering casting something before Keaton attacks with that Karizev. Or he could be bluffing, having something to maybe try to talk Keaton out of it. He does have something.
He does have the Abrade, and he's going to kill Karizev to keep Ragavan off the table and that extra point of menace damage coming over. Does this mean that Keaton doesn't have any great attacks?
It looks like it to me, and so
Ooh.
Steve is going to have some chances here now with the Scarab God's scry ability. He's going to have the chance to dig to this Vraska's Contempt, and honestly, if he has Vraska's Contempt for this Hazoret, he could very easily come back and win this game.
Boy, this is getting interesting. Keaton also, remember, has Bomat Courier with 3 cards under it.
Yep.
And that could certainly be relevant given the fact that he has Hazoret the Fervent on the battlefield.
And this is looking like a good attack to me. I think I would definitely want to get that Heart of Kirin in. You want to get that zombie off the battlefield. It's going to just help Steve dig with the Scarab God to something. So nice attack there from Keaton.
And, of course, it stays gone.
I would have been sorely tempted to sacrifice my Bomat Courier there if I were Keaton to try to find a 5th and a 6th mana to set up a double Hazoret activation on my next turn. Keaton values holding the Bomat Courier for a little bit longer.
Magma Spray?
Is that what he drew?
Only got a quick look at it. Let me see. Yeah, he's got 2 of them in the main. That's my guess.
Still maybe just kind of priced into this Champion of Wits here to try to dig himself to Vraska's Contempt, because really there's nothing besides Vraska's Contempt and potentially that 1 hour of devastation that can get him out of the Hazoret situation here.
Okay, let's see what he can find. He's going to need to find a land and a Vraska's Contempt in there.
He does have, as it stands, 1 more turn. This is a pro maneuver to have all of your creatures taking up the red zone. You know, it's aggressive. You've just dominated the whole table space, you know?
Especially for the control deck.
Yeah.
That is bold.
Yeah. It's like the Middle Ages. You just kind of encroach on your neighbor's territory until eventually it just becomes part of your realm.
Mm-hmm.
These are the nightmares that you face all the time playing these Grixis decks against Red. You know, it's like, the threats that Red is able to produce on a wave-by-wave basis are just so brutal and so resilient that, you know, Steve, remember, played turn 5 Scarab God and then got to untap with it, and it's untapped with it a couple times since then. That's the dream.
Normally, you're quite happy.
That's the dream, and he's still really under the gun here.
Yeah, he really is.
I think we're still maybe relitigating that elemental token from the Rekindling Phoenix. I'm going to be honest. I'm not 100% sure of the rules interaction with Rekindling Phoenix.
Okay.
It's still one of those newer cards, and then obviously there was a zombie token, a 4/4 zombie token. Oh, I see. So maybe Steve should have gotten the 0/1 elemental when his own Rekindling Phoenix. Is that possibly what something should have happened?
That could be.
He may have missed the trigger on that. I don't know if you even get one when it's a zombie that was. It's kind of interesting.
Boy,
but
that could matter though, right? I mean,
but
an
clearly
additional blocker on the ground,
it
but he
would have been
missed it.
Steve's trigger anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, that time has come and gone for that, it would seem.
And just catching everybody up on where we are right now. Steve has drawn 2 cards from Champion of Wits, is still deciding on what his discard is, and at a precarious 4 life against Hazoret the Fervent is still kind of digging for those copies of Vraska's Contempt hiding somewhere in his deck.
Yeah, he's got Bomat Courier to deal with. Like, this is just a lot of problems for Ruben. So The fact that Keaton did not sacrifice a courier on his main phase, does that mean that he's fairly committed now to going all the way to his turn and turning that thing sideways?
Not necessarily. Because he has another artifact in play, he could still want to try to dig towards specifically unlicensed disintegration. Okay, so here's the discard.
Glint
It's-
Sleeve Siphoner and a Gearhulk.
It's still, to me, it's looking very much like Keaton wants to activate Hazard the Fervent twice. Doesn't have a lot of other stuff that, I mean, he could draw Glorybringer. That would be good.
Hey, Glorybringer! There it is. And all Ruben can do is look at the magma spray that he so deftly left available.
So he had the Glorybringer. He didn't have the 5th land.
There you go. Another reason why he didn't want to crack the Bomat Courier. So game 1 goes to Keaton Wood after a bit of a mix-up there in the middle part. And we're back underway in game number 2. Yes, the deck archetypes are swapped. Your eyes are not deceiving you. But we did record this a little bit earlier, so we can't fix it actively. We do apologize for that. There's Kiri Zev. Bzz, abraded.
So one of the things you'll notice is a difference of Steve's deck versus, for example, the Esper deck we saw Luis Salvato play earlier on camera, is that his deck's not attempting to go 1-for-1, and then use Glimmer of Genius and Teferi to get ahead on cards. Instead, he uses the powerful late game provided by the Scarab God and by Nicol Bolas the Ravager to kind of win those mid to late game battles. So that's more his plan. He doesn't have access to just getting ahead on pure raw cards as much as Luis did. Kind of a cool thing there. So you notice kind of Steve cast a negate on Keaton's Doomfall. Negate is not the kind of card you would normally expect to bring in against what is a red creature deck, right, on first glance game 1. But that's Steve understanding the way the post-sideboard configurations are different than game 1, where Keaton's deck is going to be much heavier on things like Chandra, Torch of Defiance, and Doomfall.
There you go. And he has found a target for negate and now one for Supreme Will as well. And he's kept the board completely clear. Here's land number 5. Does he have the goods? No, he's just going to pass the turn back for now. That doesn't mean that he's not in good position. He just may have more answers than threats. But look at this. Here comes Rekindling Phoenix, another must answer. Supreme Will that.
Priced in, yeah.
Yeah, got to do it. That's kind of the strength of this red-black aggro deck. Just these threats are so potent, you just can't even let one of them slip by.
They're all so brutal, yeah.
And land number 6 hits the battlefield for Ruben, but he's now passed the turn back to Keaton, who has yet to deal a single point of damage nor stick a threat on the battlefield for more than a turn cycle. But Ruben, with no Torrential Gearhulk this time, or at least decided not to cast it if he had it, passes the turn back to Wood.
But again, Keaton not as under as much pressure to put pressure on Steve as against, for example, an Esper deck. Steve is not going to get cascading advantages from anything he's doing as opposed to sitting in play with Teferi for 3 turns. So anything other than Steve playing the Scarab God and starting to activate it for a few turns, Keaton can kind of continue interplay with. So, you know, although Keaton obviously would ideally have Steve under more pressure at this point, he is not as clearly of the early game role as against, for example, an Esper deck.
Lots of lands here for Ruben, but now the pressure's really starting to mount, and he's facing down 6 power on the battlefield. He's got to have something. He does. It's Harness Lightning, our old friend. That's going to take care of the Chain Whirler, but still Ruben's going to take 3.
Here's the one constant, right, with the blue-black X being red or white strategies, is that Steve's draws now, when he has 8 lands in play, are extremely powerful. If you were to draw something like Torrential Gearhulk, like the Scarab God, like Nicol Bolas the Ravager, they look really, really strong on this board state. And there's the classic post-combat Glorybringer.
Glorybringer go.
So I'm not sure why Keaton didn't want to play that during pre-combat. I don't know. I think trying to sniff out a Torrential Gearhulk, didn't want to run into Torrential Gearhulk Supreme Will, but
Yeah, that's probably the thinking. But boy, you give up a lot of the utility of a Glorybringer by doing it that way.
I do like 4 damage.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of 4 damage historically.
Large percentage of your starting life total. Well, he did get in for 3.
Steve found a Vraska's Contempt off of Supreme Will, and as we mentioned a million times, Vraska's Contempt, just one of the absolute strongest cards against these red-black decks. So Steve is equipped to be able to handle this combat step a little bit better.
What is he going to use it on? He's just going to go ahead and take out the Glorybringer. It's 1 extra damage that he gets to save, though the Scrounger's the more annoying long-term option.
Although, again, as opposed to some of the other Teferi style decks, Steve's deck is actually equipped to enter combat with Scrapheap Scrounger with things like Nicol Bolas, the Scarab God, Torrential Gearhulk. So if he finds basically any creature, he can fight back.
Down to 11 is Steve Rubin, and he's being attacked for 6. Oh, there it is. The Torrential Gearhulk, though, from Rubin. Kaboom. And he's going to get that Vraska's Contempt back. Now he can take out the Scrounger. Gain 2 life. Or maybe I spoke too soon. Is he going to... He's going to cycle.
And these are the
Finds
turns
land.
where when the red-black deck has License Disintegration, they basically always win. And when they don't, they basically always lose.
That's what he was looking for there.
Yeah.
Well, he did have an Abrade.
Okay.
That gets that Chain Whirler back in, so down to 10 again.
Yeah, but you can't feel that great with just Goblin Chain Whirler against 8 open mana from the Grixis deck and a couple cards in hand, where almost any card that Steve can have at this point is absolutely brutal.
Hey, case in point, the Scarab God has arrived.
And we
that
see,
will act as a stop sign for the Goblin Chain Whirler here.
yep, Keaton has 1 turn. This better be a really impressive turn if you're Keaton Wood.
Nope. Now, interestingly, Keaton does have 2 activations on a Scrapheap Scrounger available. Does he have one in his yard? No. The other one got exiled as well. So that means Steve Rubin can have free reign with his graveyard if he wants.
If Steve were at, let's say, 8 right now,
Mhm.
there are ways that Keaton could come back and win this game. But 10, that just sounds like so much against Scarab God and 2 activations a turn. So, forgive me, but I think it's all over but the scrying at this point.
Okay. Yeah, it's only game 2.
Right. Keaton will have game 3 on the play, where we've seen the red-black aggro deck just be so strong and so brutal.
Rubin sends in the Scarab God, gets in for 5 damage. Wood goes land go. And now we're going to see Torrential Gearhulk brought back at instant speed with the Scarab God.
Yeah, but it's
actually
only
smaller.
it's only a 4/4
Yeah.
Torrential Gearhulk, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Downgrade it into just a 2-for-1 with 4 power and 4 toughness. So once again, Steve Rubin looks like he's ready to just about end this thing.
Yeah, you might think Steve's got 14 power out. No. That's only 13 power. So
Well,
Keaton-
can he get 2 Chain Whirlers? Yeah, he can. So get rid of the Scrounger, not that it was blocking anyway. Does that get him to lethal?
certainly at least chat lethal.
All right. That is finally going to do it for game number 2, which means game number 3 is now upon us. It's like a professional sports coach calling for the referee there. As you may have surmised, we did have an issue with our graphic there.
Right. This is a reference, of course, to Steve calling for the referee in Game 1 to adjudicate the elemental token.
The
So
egg.
he said ref and raised his hand like that. So that's what we're calling his deck.
Hashtag ref. Insert some PSA about always calling a judge.
Yeah,
here.
you
Hashtag
should.
ref.
You know, it is true. Call a judge. If you don't know what's going on in your match, you don't know the rules. Call a judge. There should not be a stigma against calling over a judge to adjudicate
That's right.
situations.
Hashtag ref.
Hashtag ref.
PaulRietzel.com.
Yep. All right, so Steve, 1 drop, 2 drop.
Yeah, one for one, 1 for 1. Ooh, sweeper 2 now.
Oh, man. It's the old turn 3 tapped Drowned Catacomb.
Awkward.
Ugly, yeah.
Well, he better hope he has some other way to interact here.
Is it Chandra o'clock?
Tick-tock. Does she resolve? Oh, yeah. Empty board Chandra. That is a good place to be for Keaton Wood.
Yeah.
Steady stream of damage and or card advantage. Even can give you that mana bump to cast a couple spells in one turn.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Steve's hand not well equipped to deal with this Chandra. He would have loved to have Vraska's Contempt. It looks like Chandra's going to be getting out of Hour of Devastation range on this turn. And honestly, I don't know what it is exactly that Steve can do about this Chandra long term.
Yeah, Chandra may just run away with this one. Vraska's Contempt is starting to look like a card Steve's going to need soon.
Yeah, very soon.
She's already at 6 loyalty. Ultimate's at 7.
Mm-hmm.
All right, get rid of that.
Yeah, we saw a bunch of players on Twitter begging for Infernal Reckonings in Providence earlier this morning. Couldn't find them in the hall, so.
You can see why it takes care of the Scrap Heap Scoundrel quite nicely. Scarab God. All right, so Steve Rubin has responded by playing a powerful threat that could potentially pressure Chandra's loyalty count. Oop, easy there. Keaton decided not to play the Duress because I guess he's got Doomfall and only 1 black mana. Anyway, says, I'd like you to sacrifice a creature and exile it,
This is brutal. Is this going to be a desperation? Oh, did he draw it?
Oh, he got there.
Wow.
Look at that.
On
Vraska's Contempt at just the last minute for Steve Rubin. Nice rip there, Steve. Oh, but an immediate replacement, Chandra, means that he's right back under pressure.
But importantly, this one only at 5 loyalty, perfect size for Hour of Devastation to take care of.
I would do that.
I would do that.
Yeah, that's the
It
thing
is,
that I would do.
importantly, a non-Bolas Planeswalker. So
That is true.
Yeah.
And away she goes. So clunky, right? 5 mana sorcery speed answer, but you do what you got to do when your opponent's ticking up a Planeswalker on an empty board.
absolutely.
Oh, but there's Hazaret, but no ability to attack with a bunch of cards in hand. Cycle a land, find another land, play it, go.
Yep, and next turn, Keaton will know, obviously, with Steve playing a Fetid Pool, that Steve is interested in that 6th mana. That means Torrential Gearhulk in the situation.
Is that his second blue mana source as well?
Yep.
Yeah. Cycle away a black-red land, play a blue-black land. Something's up. And, that's actually quite good here as well. As the Gearhulk matches up well against Hazaret in combat and then also can use Vraska's Contempt out of that graveyard to take care of one of these threats.
Steve thinking, is there any reason to do this right now? Do I care if he uses Hazaret a couple times, or do I want to say go and force Keaton to act first? He's basically judging, it's not worth it to get just hit by Hazaret's activated ability twice.
Okay. Then might as well just do it now, get that life total buffer in there.
And you might think, Steve's at 11. What does he care if Keaton uses the rest of his resources to hit him for 4? Well, remember, there's that cut Ribbons that Keaton discarded earlier, so Ribbons threatening to finish Steve off.
Once again, Ragavan the Monkey runs headlong into Torrential Gearhulk like a fool, and then immediately runs away again. But in the meantime, Glorybringer did hit Steve. He's down to 8.
And a kind of interesting decision point. Keaton electing not to exert the Glorybringer allowed the Torrential Gearhulk to get in and jump and block the monkey. Otherwise, that would have been a trade. So, obviously, we're playing a little bit accelerated here as the pairings are going to be up for the next round shortly. But interesting decision point from Keaton.
No, just as you say that, Paul, we hear over the loudspeakers that the pairings are going up, but hopefully we'll have enough time to just finish up this game and see who wins it. Steve Rubin or Keaton Wood at 5-0 and ref, respectively. Supreme Will to dig. You do what you got to do, I guess. Is he going to find just another copy of Supreme Will?
What he really wants is either a Chandra's defeat for that Glory Bringer or a fatal push for the Kari Zev. Either would be things he's happy with. He needs cheap answers to things right now.
Well, he saw a copy of Glory Bringer and a Supreme Will and decided that he didn't want any of it.
Oh, man.
Ooh, unlicensed disintegration, but Steve's going to actually save some life here by using his magma spray in response and leaving Keaton with no artifacts left in play. And that actually saved lethal for Ruben, but he drew his card for the turn, did not find what he needed, and Keaton Wood took that thing down. So you saw the handshake there, 6-0 for Keaton Wood.
And his decision to not
Cruising.
exert the Glory Bringer makes a lot of sense given the unlicensed disintegration in his hand. He wasn't worried about the torrential gear hook. In fact, he thought maybe that's a liability for Steve Rubin long term. So nicely played by Keaton Wood through today too.
Yeah, so great stuff from him. We're going to be back with more winning in right after these messages.